Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I actually have a special guest here, Nolan Duda. He is our sales manager here at IdealTraits. So I just wanted to introduce him right quick because he is actually going to be going over with us today the resume red flags of hiring a salesperson. So kind of that strategy and things like that. So Nolan, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, like how long have you been with IdealTraits, things like that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's good to be here. It's good
Yeah.
to. This is my first one, as you know, Monica. So, as we were talking, I was a little unprepared, but I think Monica's going to be able to guide me through it. But yeah,
Yes.
my name is Nolan Duda, as I mentioned, or as Monica mentioned. I'm the sales manager for IdealTraits. So I've been with IdealTraits for just about 4 years now. And I started as an intern back in 2019. So it's been quite the ride. Seen a lot of different changes, obviously, with the pandemic and things like that. And I took over as the sales manager back at the beginning of last February, so February 2022. And at that point, I think, Monica, we had what? It was just me and Jeff in the sales department, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
now we've grown from just two people, so myself and Jeff, who some of you may be familiar with, and now we have 7 people total. So we've certainly been able to find some good salespeople over the last 12 months. It's been exciting, sometimes stressful, as we'll talk about too, when it comes to hiring salespeople and really just hiring in general. But
Right.
nonetheless, yeah, a little bit, just close to 4 years now, and yeah, I don't know if there's
That's
anything else you
awesome.
wanted me to touch on.
No, that's perfect. And I think really having your aspect and just the way that you think about hiring is going to be really helpful for these agents because of the fact that with hiring for sales, whether it is in insurance or with the industry that we work in, right?
Yeah,
Or car sales, let's say, right? No matter what, I think that the main attributes that you have as a salesperson kind of reflect from those different job categories with still the same intent on selling. So having your
sure.
perspective is going to be really nice and definitely want to dive in and just going over what your strategy is like with hiring salespeople. So kind of tell me a little bit about that. Like when you're getting that ad pulled together and things like that, is that something that you think about months in advance or tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so I mean, the most relevant that I can speak to is just recently when we hired both Josh and Fabricio just 3 weeks ago. So they started
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, and we started that process back in December. So
Hmm.
I knew that I had 3 or 4 months to be able to find the right people because again, it can take definitely some time to be able to find people that are perfect for you and your agency or your business or your department,
Right.
whatever it may be. So I allotted myself about 4 months of time, made it happen in just under 4 months. So I was starting to get a little antsy, but
Hmm.
throughout the time, obviously when we're going through and we're creating the job ad, we're looking to put definitely a competitive compensation plan together. So
Right.
we, of course, IdealTraits we're hiring remote, right? So my team is fully remote, even for my individuals that are here in Michigan. Some of them live as close as 5 minutes to the office, and other one, I have an employee in California. So I made adjustments, obviously, with that. But in terms of when we're putting together the job ad, we want to have as many benefits as possible, and we want to have a competitive compensation plan put together. So we have a base salary, have a commission structure. Our commission structure has a threshold that's attributed to it. So there's a benchmark that our representatives have to meet in order to get to that step of
Right.
earning commission, if you will. It isn't a
Hmm.
draw. I know that you mentioned the car business. Sometimes if you have experience in the car business,
Right.
familiar with that draw program that's out there. But we put together something that's competitive. Our on-track earnings for the first year is probably somewhere between 55 to 70,000. Depending on the production that particular individual puts together.
Right.
But again, over the time, once we started it, I believe it, like middle December. Since the
Hmm.
beginning or the middle of December, we had a remote job ad posted with those compensation plans put in as many benefits really as we could seek out.
Right.
And then we ended up getting 700 applications in 3.5
Wow.
months. And it was it was a lot to go through. It took a lot of time for sure.
Right.
Luckily, here at IdealTraits, we had Faith to be able to help us with her candidate engagement program, something that
Hmm.
is available now to our IdealTraits clients to be able to
Yeah.
really sort through those candidates and make sure that we found somebody that's really a good fit for us. Because again, out of that 700 candidates, we hired two. I hired two of those people, right? So, of course,
Right.
not all of them completed the assessment. So, for my positions, if you don't complete the assessment, then you don't get to be considered for the role. It is the next
Right.
step in the process, and I'm pretty straightforward with that. And then we ran them through a video interview. So they did like a video similar to what we're on now, Monica, but it was
Yeah.
just themselves recording themselves answering their questions. So I was able to see them and I was able to hear them. And then in that process, I'm looking for people who, when they're speaking about themselves, their past experience, their
Right.
hobbies, what motivates them, these types of questions I ask to a salesperson, I'm
Hmm.
looking for someone when they're telling a story or they're talking about themselves, I can feel the passion behind it, if that makes sense. Somebody
Yes.
who's talking with passion, with
Right.
power, right? And is drawing me in to be like, man, I want to hear more from this person, right?
Right.
And their experience could be really anything. It could be
Hmm.
they worked, in fast food, or they have
Right.
15 years of software sales experience, which of course would pique my interest as well. But no matter what the experience is, as long as they're speaking with vigor and passion and drawing me in and wanting me to hear more, that's what I'm looking for in the initial stages, obviously, with a matchup in the personality. So if
Right.
that makes sense, super long-winded on the question that you
No,
asked,
that's
but I
perfect.
hope it
And
gives
that and
some
it really
insight.
like
Yeah.
breaks down like the individual questions that I had also. Like for
Yeah.
example, like is experience something that you look for, on a resume?
Yeah, I'll say this. Typically, if you have somebody who has sales experience, they're going to be a little bit easier to train because they understand the process. They're familiar with quota and production and making calls, or
Right.
whatever it is. But Fabricio, who we just hired, has limited sales experience. He's just a couple of years, but one of his most like recent experience was with door-to-door sales.
Okay.
So for me, I was like, okay, this is different because it's an inside sales position, right? So you're working and you're making calls
Right.
and you're prospecting through email and things like that. So, but what I was confident in that, even though it was a different type of sales, because if you've ever done outside sales, you definitely know that it's different from inside.
Hmm.
But facing that rejection, I was comfortable with it because I was like, okay, he's familiar with rejection, he's familiar with production and meeting those goals. So I think it will translate well. So typically I do look for at least a little bit of experience, but I'm a believer in you can train no matter
Right.
what you're selling. Like you could be selling anything. It could be
Yeah.
software, again, it could be insurance, it could
Yeah.
be again anything, right? So no matter what you're selling, you can teach them the verbiage and how to sell it and
Right.
how to be experts on that particular product.
Hmm.
What you can't train is their personality. You
Yeah.
can't teach the passion that needs to be portrayed when you're selling something to someone, right? Because you have to
Right.
have that certain level of confidence, and that comes from it stems from motivation, right? So that motivation and confidence and that ability to really win people over. So that's what I look for. I do hold merit and experience for sure, and it's nice to
Right.
see. But when it comes down to it, I'm looking for how you talk about yourself, right? You talk about your
Right.
ambitions. You talk about what you love to do, your hobbies, and what you've done in the past, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I look for most importantly. But I think experience does hold a little bit of merit. But again, you can
Yeah.
teach the things about insurance and what needs to be taught and what they need to do and help them become experts on that, but you
Right.
can't teach them to have a specific personality and how to be successful with that personality, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. And I think just understanding that mentality as well is so important because of the fact I think sometimes we try to reactively hire and it's like
Yeah.
needing that person that needs that experience already. They can't be trained because you don't have the time. It's like, okay, it might take a little bit longer to find someone with that with all of those requirements that you're looking for, but
Yeah.
understanding like, hey, like from you said, from your perspective it might take a little bit more training with someone that doesn't have inside sales experience. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, that's I think something that from the manager perspective, right, you're willing to take on and being able to just kind of show them the ropes and really showing them the way that you want things to be done from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to agents about this all the time too. Like, there's pros and cons to both sides. When you
Yeah.
have somebody who doesn't have experience, again, it's going to take a little bit more work. It's going to take a little bit more time, and really, you
Right.
should give them time to be able to understand all of that
Hmm.
information that you're throwing their way. But then, additionally, too, as well, if you hire somebody who's experienced, you run the risk of having somebody who has bad habits from their past positions or just
Right.
past ways that they've done things that really affect them from being able to adapt to your way of doing things, which
Right.
if you have a method in place now where you have let's say 4 people that are
Hmm.
operating at a high level, they're selling, they're meeting their production goals, the company is growing, the department is growing, or just your agency in general is growing. That's what people like. You have a system that works. You need to stay to that, not make adjustments there. So if
Right.
somebody's not willing to take your feedback and begin implementing it, then you just have a problem, right? So
Right.
again, there's pros and cons to both sides. Again, I think that training somebody from the ground up is going to take more time and can
Hmm.
be a little bit of a larger headache potentially. But then obviously having somebody who has bad habits who won't adapt to what you're trying to teach them,
Yeah.
that's a whole
Also
different
be
type of headache.
problematic.
So
Yeah.
there isn't really, I can't, I would think that in this day and age, like there's better talent out there that you can find that just doesn't have an insurance license yet, that you can teach the way that you want them to be taught, and then they can become great employees for you, right? So,
Definitely.
um, and then you mentioned reactive hiring. I mean, again, I touched on a little bit. I gave myself 4 months to find
Right.
2 great people, took 700 candidates to find the two. So
Hmm.
giving yourself plenty of time is the key too, because again, if you do rush your hiring process into a 30-day window, you're going to end up being like, well, I need to fill this chair in a week. I'm just going to hire the next person that tells me they're going to be good. And that is,
Right.
again, a whole different type of risk that you're opening yourself up to.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And going into that as well, like hiring someone like within that short amount of time, you have their resume, you're taking a look over it. I mean, do you even feel like you have enough time within that short amount of span to really get to know them and understand like what makes them tick within that amount of time? Or is that something that you think should be thought out a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, a week is just you're just pushing it too close. Even a month,
Right.
I think that for depending on the position that you're looking to hire for. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're looking to hire an in-office licensed person, give yourself 6 months. If you're looking to hire somebody who's more entry level or you're open to inexperience and it's in office, give yourself 4. And then if you're open to remote, whether it's licensed or unlicensed, I would say give yourself somewhere between 3 to 4, right? These are
Right.
just all ways for you to be able to protect yourself and the
Hmm.
investment that you're making into
Yeah.
this process. Because again, if you put yourself in a situation where you need to hire really bad, it's going to be more stressful, more time consuming, and it's going to cost you more. Probably something that has been told before on a Wednesday workshop and something that
Yeah.
I hold very close to the chest, right? Like in terms of
Right.
like, this is how I'm going to run the process. So,
Hmm.
um, I mean, I work pretty quickly in my process because I know that the candidate engagement side of it is extremely important. Because if I
Right.
let a candidate hang around for 4 or 5 days, they're probably moved on to something else. So
Hmm.
I'm constantly communicating with the candidate. And if I interview them and I like what they have to say, I'm moving them to the next step in the process within 24 hours.
Right.
Either scheduling another interview the next day or when their schedule allows it, hopefully within 48 hours, because I want to stay engaged with them. So I have their phone number. I'm texting them, being like, can't wait to meet again today at
Yeah.
4 or whatever the
Keeping them
example is.
excited as well as yourself reminded about them
Yeah,
and
yeah,
letting
because
them know that there's someone that's on your mind.
exactly, right? Because I want not only to keep them engaged, but I understand also too that there's a part of it where I want them to sell me on themselves, right? But then I also have to be able to sell the position to them, right?
Right.
In terms of like, here's the opportunity. This is what you need to do to be successful. If you're on board with that, it's going to be a great position for you, right? And then
Right.
the other side of that is them talking to me about their strengths, their weaknesses, their qualities, where they're going to best fit, and
Yeah.
why they best fit after I've told them all about the position. So I'm super transparent right from the beginning. I mean, with responsibilities, requirements, expectations, because with salespeople, I mean, they're like just in general, we have super big egos, right?
Yeah.
And it can be really tough to like navigate. And what will happen sometimes for a new employee, and I'm not saying this is happening every single time, but for a new employee from time to time, they'll test the limit, right, of
Hmm.
what's
Right.
acceptable and what's not acceptable. So right from the beginning, I'm setting what's acceptable and what's not. I'm setting that expectation, and I'm
Right.
keeping constant communication with them, sending them maybe information for them to review or cool stuff that we have coming out or just interesting stuff about the position itself to really keep them engaged, especially if they're a candidate that I really like. Like
Yeah.
then I'm going after them and being like, I'm trying to keep them engaged. It's super
Right.
important. So,
Yeah, because I think it's something
yeah,
on that we might miss out on from understanding that it is kind of like a tennis match almost, like continuously going back and forth.
yeah,
They do show that first well, I guess you would by putting that job ad out there, and then they kind of hit it back with applying and such. But it is very important to stay engaged with that candidate and make sure that. Like you mentioned, those expectations are continuously there and that communication is there. So that way there's not a doubt in their mind of am I supposed to be starting on Monday, or did I get the job right? I think that can be very problematic. But
Yeah.
one portion of this I did want to highlight on is going over specifically their resumes, because I know that there are obviously going through like 700 plus of them, right? I mean, resumes, you've probably seen amazing ones to absolutely would never look at again. So,
Yeah.
out of curiosity, I would just love to hear about like some of your main points with that, or your biggest red flags with being able to navigate through those resumes.
Yeah, yeah. Again, having like you mentioned, Monica, and I mentioned before, having 700 of them to go through, I don't have 5 minutes per resume to be able to look at them, right?
Right.
So I'm looking at them pretty quickly, right? And of course, again, as I mentioned prior, they have to complete the assessment first to be considered. So
Yeah.
it does cut it down a little bit, which obviously helps. But then in terms of the resume, which I know we want to focus on, I'm first looking at how it's put together. Is it put together professionally, or is it put together sort of on a whim, right? I
Mm-hmm.
want, obviously some effort to be put behind that resume to be able to be for it to be seen that's like, okay, I'm applying to jobs, and I want the particular individual that's looking at my resume to be like, okay,
Right.
wow, this is a well put together resume. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at that first and foremost. Maybe it's a little bit of me because that's the way that I would do things, but
Right.
um, again, I think that that's important because I want to know, like, hey, this person has taken the time to actually put together a resume that looks good and is
Mm-hmm.
impressive, right? Then at that point, a couple of things I look out for is job history. So if you've had 3 different jobs in the last year and a half, I'm probably like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, okay, this is something that I'm going to ask about. Is it make or break for me? No, because there might be some reasons behind it. And obviously it's something that I'm looking out for and that it's a red flag in my head.
Right.
And it's something that I'm going to highlight during that first interview if I've decided to take that route. So
Being very
it's definitely,
transparent about it. Right.
again, yeah, if there's a concern that you have with the resume, but you still feel good about the candidate, just ask them, right? Just be transparent with them
Right.
and have that conversation. And if it's not an answer that you don't like, then you got your answer, right? And then you can move on.
Right.
And that's where the video interview is huge for me, because if I have that concern, I can ask those questions and then have that person answer those selected questions without me having to be there. And then I just watch the recording at my own time, right?
Right.
When I do have the time. So, additionally too as well, I'm looking for, I guess, like just overall punctuation and grammar. Like I'm looking for it to be
Yeah.
put together pretty well, and I'm
Okay.
looking for ambition behind it too as well. So like,
Yeah.
talk to me about what you're looking to do in the future, like where you want to be, what your skill set is, and what you want to improve on. These are things that it's not included on every resume, but it's something that
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for. So I guess, like, right off the top of my head, those would be the things that I'm looking for right off of the bat, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Definitely. And I will say, like, another thing just to keep in mind on what to avoid as well is, maybe some gaps in between employment history as well. Maybe not necessarily to avoid, but like Nolan mentioned, if these are concerns that you have, being sure to address it during that first interview, keeping that transparency up and going, because the last thing that you want to do, which Nolan, I'm sure that you've probably been in this predicament as well, you get pretty far with a candidate just to be told, or some news like, oh, hey, actually, I don't have any internet and they don't plan on making any internet near me. So sorry, like, I don't have that ability. Like, okay, like that would have been helpful to know before we spent a month trying to interview you, right? So just
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, and keeping that transparency in the back of your head during those talks and those interview questions that you may be scheduling with those candidates.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the gap in employment is another good one that you brought up, Monica. I forgot
Hmm.
about that. And I
Yeah.
think it goes hand in hand with the multiple jobs within a year and a half or
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
time frame that you want to put on it. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, excuse me, for me, because again, something might have happened during that
Right.
lapse of employment. It could have been a death in the family. It
Yeah.
could have been, maybe a divorce or something of the sort, right?
Right. A
That's,
big major life
sometimes,
change that it's like,
yeah.
I need to step away for a little.
Yeah. So again, I like to ask questions about that and just, explain to me
Hmm.
what happened here. And sometimes I like the answer, sometimes I don't. Right. So then
Right.
if I don't like the answer, I'm moving on. And if I do like the answer, it's like, okay, wow, I really like this candidate. I'm glad I took the time to ask the question and get an explanation from them. Because again, you never know what it is, right? It could be anything.
Right.
And those big life changes can really cripple people. And, I've been through
Hmm.
some myself that are
Right.
tough to get through. So it's something that I'm definitely open and transparent about. And then,
Hmm.
again, with that transparency, with compensation, with expectations, and with requirements of the position, there's been multiple occasions where I've met with candidates and they're like, hey, I don't think this is a position for me. It's like,
Yeah.
great. I'm glad I figured that out, right? I know something that you alluded to a little bit, but like
Right.
that's good for me. I like that because now I know that like, hey, I have figured this out. I gave you a chance. We talked. Not a good fit for you. Probably not going to be a good fit on our end either. Let's part ways as friends and
Right.
wish you the best, right?
Yeah, and I
So
don't think that there's anything wrong with that either.
no.
I mean, just being able to understand that you can't hire every single person that you talk to, right? And we do even have rejection emails that you can utilize if that is something that you need help maybe to let someone down, right? Or sending that rejection um, template, right? So you can actually duplicate them, create your own if you would like, but still communicating with that candidate so that way they're not waiting like, oh, did I get the job right? Setting those expectations. And because I know if I was applying to a job, I would probably want that same courtesy
Yeah.
of, hey, I'm not interested in this position anymore. Thank you so much. And then same thing from your end, hey, this might not be the best fit. Thank you so much for applying. Here's a quick little thing. Have a great rest of your day. A
Yeah. Yeah.
little
Yeah.
more sentimental than that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another thing that I wanted to highlight on as well is that do you ever see like inside of resumes, like maybe where they started off like extremely hot and then they just started maybe digressing? Is that like with their different job opportunities or where they've recently been? Is that something that you've seen in the past?
Um, I'm honestly, I not particularly. I
Okay.
think that
Yeah.
for those resumes that I think look sharp, I take
Right.
that at face value, right? Because again, at the end of the day, anybody could put whatever they want on their resume. So I guess that
Hmm.
that's a red flag in itself, right?
Yeah,
Which is why
definitely.
I have the assessment and I have the video interviewing tool to be able to really get to some questions and obviously find out more about their personalities. So anybody could put whatever they want on there. I'm looking at job history. I'm looking at how well it's put together. And then, yeah,
Hmm.
obviously, Monica, on a case by case basis, if there's like a resume that looks really good at the top, then it sort of peters out at the end, then I am probably going to take notice to that, right? But in terms of like the main things that I look for, I suppose, that isn't one of them. But again, like a
Right.
resume in itself, can be a red flag. So having different
Yeah.
tools in place for you to be able to really get some good quality information about them is going to be where you're looking to make your difference. So,
100%.
but I'm sure people have ran into that before too, like beefed up resumes, things like that, that
Oh,
are just a
yeah.
little over the top,
One of my
for
favorite
sure.
things that I heard was that the only two times that we're ever perfect in life is when we are first born and on our resume. So it's honestly so true because we tend to try to put our best foot forward when creating those resumes. Maybe not always with some candidates, but I know a vast majority tend to.
Yeah,
So just keeping that in mind as well. Being able
yeah,
to understand that every resume is going to be different. We actually did get a question on what are our thoughts on LinkedIn profiles versus resumes when looking at candidates. My LinkedIn contains the same information as my resume and is a bit more dynamic with pictures and other LinkedIn features. Do you see the quote typical resume going away?
yeah. I don't know if the resume is ever going to go away, because it is, obviously something that specifically just has your qualifications and your experience. I think LinkedIn profiles are fantastic. Obviously I have a LinkedIn too as well. If you don't,
Yeah.
you should get one, right? Because it's a good opportunity for you to network with those individuals in the same industry as you and in the same local network as you. But I think it's important for you to be able to really put the everything out there in terms of your qualifications on both, right? So I guess at some point or another, it may go away. Obviously, as social media linking is becoming more popular, I know that there's applications out there that allow you to link your LinkedIn to it and other social medias. So that could be a good component to where your resume is replacing it. And then I know on some aspects, when you apply to jobs, it'll take your LinkedIn profile and then create a resume for you, right? So
Right.
it's super important for you to have that resume up to date, as well as having those specific things in there that you're looking to really help portray to the individuals that are viewing your profile. Because if you're applying to a position and they're looking at your LinkedIn profile, they're looking at both your resume and your LinkedIn, right? As it
Right.
stands now. So having both of those things up to date, and then obviously as we progress and become, more of an online presence for things such as this, I think it's
Hmm.
completely reasonable to assume that LinkedIn and other formats may fill in the place or become options with a resume, so a resume or your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
But in terms of anything in the immediate future being like, okay, resumes are a thing of the past, I don't see that happening. So for now, I would say have both. If you're a candidate, having
Right.
both up to standard of what you're looking to portray, and then if you're an employer, a LinkedIn can be a great place. So really, just social media in general can
Hmm.
be a great place for you to be able to find out more about the candidates beyond just what their resume says.
Right. And I think LinkedIn is just great for that career aspect more specifically. I know that, sometimes people try looking them up online and they're like, I can't find them. It's like, that might be the scenario, but LinkedIn, in my opinion, is really for those career achievements or developments throughout your life. So being able
Yeah.
to utilize that is a great tool and definitely something that I think will probably be used more and more, like Nolan said, as time goes on. But for the idea of resumes completely going away, I don't think that that's going to be happening, hopefully, anytime soon. But
Yeah.
yeah, great question, Ryan.
I think we had one in the chat too, Monica. I think there's a question in there.
Yes. Andrea had mentioned, it's funny you would actually like touch base on it immediately after, but she did ask, I heard you mention about not bothering to contact an applicant if they did not complete their assessment. And that is something that you don't do, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I guess the reason behind it, Andrea, is because when I had with that particular situation, having 700 candidates to go through, I just didn't have time to go through them all, right? So for me, if it's a situation where you're seriously interested in the position that we have offered, you'll complete that assessment. Now, if you only have, let's say, 5 to 10 resumes and you have the ability to, go through them a little bit quicker, right? Then obviously 700. Then in that aspect, if there's a qualified candidate out there who hasn't yet completed the assessment and you really like what you see on their resume, I strongly encourage you to reach out to them and have them complete the assessment, right?
Yeah.
And encourage them to do so rather than just not having them completed at all, right?
Right.
Because again, as Monica mentioned, you're perfect the day that you're born and on your resume, and then anybody can tell you what you want to hear during an interview. But having that assessment helps you get that protection into the investment that you're making. It's like, okay, this person does have the personality to be successful in a sales role and help me drive revenue, which is really what the whole conversation is about. So for
Exactly.
me, for that particular situation, you're correct. I did not consider candidates who didn't complete the assessment. And there's a chance that there were some great candidates in there, but unfortunately, since they didn't take that step to complete it, I felt as if they weren't seriously considering the position. So, yes, for that scenario, absolutely.
And I think on the flip side as well, sometimes candidates forget too. So, like Nolan mentioned, having 700 plus applicants, it would have been hard to reach out to each individual one on top of their email reminders that they get to take the assessment. Instead, you can archive them. And then, should they take that assessment later on, they would be moved back into that assessment completed tab too to update that way. But if you might have like a little smaller pool, that does give you an opportunity to be able to reach out to them, maybe give them a call, thanking them for applying, right? This goes back with that beginning candidate engagement talk that we had, and then being able to say, hey, I'm not too sure if you saw, but we should have gotten an assessment as well. If you want to log in and take that, we can then follow up and continue on with the hiring process. But we do need you to complete that first in order to further consider you. Simple
Yeah.
conversation like that.
Yeah, and something that would be good to touch on too, because I keep talking about 700 applications. Again,
Yeah.
that was a remote
The remote.
position, right? So I'm
Yeah.
targeting the whole country. So if you're, obviously in the current situation where you're like, man, I'm not getting as many applications, or the ones that I'm getting really aren't qualified, I can say with complete confidence that, the people that I have now, I have one in California, one in North Carolina, one in Illinois, one in Florida, and then two that are here in Michigan with myself. So 7 of us total. We wouldn't be able to find the talent that we have that is producing and performing at the level that we have them now if I was still only hiring here in Lake Orion, Michigan. Now, Lake Orion's is a more populated place, so my target area population is about 1.2 million. But the remote opened me up to a variety of different talent and a variety of different personalities. And for my team, when they came on with IdealTraits, I have individuals that worked at Guitar Center before, and I have individuals who sold life insurance before. So I have a wide array and variety, and I have recent college graduates too. So
Yeah.
I have a wide variety of talent that's spread across a lot of different industries, and for the most part, some of them had sales experience, some of them didn't, right?
Right.
But the ones that we have now, Monica, as you can attest to, they're doing well, they're doing
Yeah.
great, right? And it's good to see them have success. So
Right.
there are ways and I guess tools that are out there to help you to be able to I guess, manage remote employees in terms
Yes.
on the sales side. We use Ring Central as our phone program, and I'm able to pull reports of analytics for the day. So I send my team analytics at the middle of the day, so 1 o'clock, which I actually forgot to do for them with how busy today's been. So I need to do that after I get off of this, but I send them at the middle of the day, and then I
Right.
go over it with them at the end of the day. And we have check-ins at the beginning of the day and check-outs at the end of the day. So we
Right.
review each other's days,
Having
talk
that
about,
accountability still.
yeah, yep. And then
Right.
again, back to the transparency part, they know that I trust them as adults to go to work every day and to do their job, right? If it's a situation where you're having to micromanage your employees, it's not a situation you want to be in. And some of you may have been there before, right? And you want to avoid that at all costs. So again, with that expectation, as long as they trust you and you trust them, they'll go out and they'll perform and they'll do their jobs. So if you want to talk more about those tools, because I know we're running short of time, but the tools and everything that we use and how my hiring process works and all that good stuff, I'm happy to talk further about it. That really can't be crunched into a 30-minute time, but happy
No,
to talk
that's
about it
excellent.
more too.
Perfect. And we will take any other questions. I see we got someone typing as well. But yeah, if there are any other questions, Nolan, thank you so much for that. But yeah, I think hiring remote is definitely something that is coming full circle, just especially with after the whole COVID, right? John just asked the question of, is this recorded? It sure is. So yes, you will be getting a copy of it once it is completed if you didn't get a chance to watch all of it. Or if you ever want to reference it again, you can actually check out our previous ones in the Help Center as well if you would. I did put in the link for next week's webinar if you would like to check that out. And Nolan, thank you so much for joining. If you guys do, like he mentioned, have any other questions, he did put his email as well as phone number here. He does work in sales, so if you do have any customer service questions, try to leave that for like myself, right? You can utilize our chat feature as well as scheduling a call, and we will gladly get you taken care of. But that he did put his resources out there, or if you do know of anyone else that is looking to hire, I mean, Nolan's been able to help out so many people here with that hiring journey. So we definitely are always looking to help out even more people. So if you guys do know of anyone that is looking to hire, he is definitely the person that they would want to talk to.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me, Monica. It's been awesome.
Of course. Well, hey, if there's no other questions, then thank you guys so much for joining and hope that you guys have an excellent week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. And thanks for joining, Nolan.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great day.